He looked into the garage and saw fire, but when he ran toward it, there was nothing, not even heat. The children said it had red eyes. It just stood there, watching. It wasn't the house that was haunted, it was the bed. A place of picket fences, school runs, and frozen winters. The kind of place nothing scary is meant to happen. But in 1987, the Tallman family of Horicon, Wisconsin purchased a second-hand bunk bed, and that's when their nightmare began. What followed were apparitions, voices, unseen fires. This is one of the few hauntings that pushed an ordinary family to burn everything and never look back. Horicon is a small town in Dodge County, surrounded by forest, farmland and marshes. The kind of town where everyone knows everyone. Alan and Debbie Tallman were a regular couple, raising 3 young children in a modest ranch-style house on Larrabee Street. Alan worked long hours. Debbie kept the home. No history of drama, no ghost stories, no obsession with the paranormal. Just a family trying to make ends meet. So when Alan brought home a used wooden bunk bed from a local second-hand shop, it seemed like a smart, money-saving decision. They didn't know it, but that bed would never let them sleep soundly again. Once the bunk bed was moved into the children's bedroom, things started to shift. Slowly at first. The youngest child complained of strange noises at night, whispering, scratching. One of the children began waking in terror, saying they saw a woman with long black hair standing in the corner. At first, Alan and Debbie thought it was imagination, growing pains, just kids being kids. But then the kids stopped sleeping altogether. They'd cry, scream. The adults started noticing things. Radios in the house began turning on and off on their own, not just flipping stations, but powering on when unplugged from the wall. A light fixture began flickering in a pattern, like Morse code, Alan later said. But it wasn't faulty wiring. Objects were moved. Doors would slam shut behind people. A chair was found moved across the kitchen with no explanation. And once Alan watched a tool roll off his workbench, against gravity. He started to suspect something was wrong, not with the house, but with something in it. The activity was always centered near the children's room, near the bunk beds. One night, Alan was in the garage putting away tools. That's when he heard it. A voice. Deep. Cold. Male.
"Come here."
He turned and saw flames licking up the wall, growing fast. He grabbed a fire extinguisher and ran toward it. But when he reached the spot, there was no fire, no heat, no smoke. Not even scorch marks. Just the wall. Untouched. Alan stood there, shaking, trying to make sense of it. He didn't know it yet, but the entity was escalating. Shortly after, the children described something that made Debbie's blood run cold. They said they'd woken up in the night and saw a tall figure in their room, glowing faintly. They couldn't see its face, but they saw its eyes. They were red. It just stood there. It didn't move, just stared. One child claimed it leaned toward the bunk bed and whispered something, but the words made no sense, just a feeling of dread. The children began sleepwalking. One was found standing in the hallway, eyes wide open but unresponsive, mumbling under their breath. The family's teenage niece, who was visiting for a weekend, woke up to find her bedsheets tugging themselves off the bed, and something cold and invisible breathing near her face. She refused to stay another night. By this point the family was sleep-deprived, terrified and desperate. They contacted their pastor, who came to the house to pray and bless the rooms. The pastor reportedly told them, "This isn't the house, it's something you've brought in. It's attached to an object." All eyes turned to the only recent change, the bunk bed. Alan made a decision that night. He took the bunk beds apart, dragged them outside and burned them to ash in the backyard. The haunting stopped immediately, but the psychological damage was done. The family packed up and left the house permanently, never to return. Word spread fast. Local police confirmed they had been called to the house multiple times and believed the family was genuinely terrified. Neighbours backed up the claims. Some even said they saw strange lights in the windows at night or heard loud banging when the house was supposed to be empty. In 1988, the case appeared on the NBC series Unsolved Mysteries. The Tallmans declined to appear on camera, not wanting fame, only peace. They never wrote a book, never sold their story to Hollywood, never courted attention, which in many ways makes their account more credible. There was nothing to gain and everything to lose. Skeptics have tried to explain the case away as sleep paralysis, mass hysteria, or overworked imaginations, but that doesn't account for the physical phenomena. The electronics behaving abnormally, the garage fire incident, or the consistent location of the disturbances. Some researchers believe the bunk bed may have been crafted from reclaimed wood, possibly from a home where trauma or death occurred. Wood is porous. It absorbs energy, according to some spiritual theories. Others believe it may have been used in an occult ritual or simply carried a negative psychic imprint, a stone tape effect, if you will, but bound to wood. What makes this case so frightening isn't a demonic possession or a Hollywood exorcism. It's how normal it was. A quiet house, a used bunk bed, and then absolute chaos. Because sometimes the most ordinary objects carry the darkest stories. Sometimes we bring home more than we bargained for. And sometimes when your children say there's something watching them from the corner of the room, they're not lying. In January 1897, Elva Zona Hester, just 23 years old, was found dead in her home. A young boy sent by her husband discovered her lying at the foot of the stairs with her head oddly twisted to one side. By the time the local doctor arrived, her husband was already there, cradling her body, wailing and weeping and behaving so erratically that the doctor barely examined her. He noted only everlasting faint as the cause of death, and later amended it to childbirth complications, despite no evidence Zona had been pregnant. She was quickly buried, and that should have been the end of it. Just days after the burial, Zona's mother, Mary Jane Hester, began having visions. According to her, Zona's spirit came to her 4 nights in a row, glowing and speaking clearly. She said, "He killed me, Mama." The ghost claimed Erasmus broke her neck during a violent fit of rage, simply because she hadn't cooked meat for dinner. She said he was cruel, short-tempered, and had a dark past. Most eerily, the ghost demonstrated how her neck had been broken, turning her own head completely around before vanishing. Mrs. Hester was convinced she wasn't imagining it, and she wasn't going to let it go. Driven by the ghost's message, Mary Jane went to the local prosecutor, John Preston, and demanded the case be reopened. To his credit, Preston listened. He spoke to the doctor again, who admitted he hadn't really examined the body, and when more people began reporting strange behaviour from Shui, controlling, volatile, secretive, the prosecutor agreed to exhume Zona's body. They performed an autopsy, and the results were stunning. Her neck was broken, her windpipe was crushed. There were finger-shaped bruises along her throat. Zona had been strangled to death. In the summer of 1897, Erasmus Shue was arrested and charged with murder. During the trial, the defence made a bold move. They mocked Mary Jane Heaster's story about the ghost in an attempt to discredit her. But it backfired. On the stand, Mary Jane calmly and confidently recounted the ghost's visits. The jury was mesmerized. The prosecutors didn't even bring it up. It was the defense that introduced the paranormal testimony. And yet, despite the supernatural angle, the rest of the evidence was so damning and Shue's behavior so suspicious that the jury found him guilty of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison, but died just 3 years later behind bars. Zona's mother never recanted or altered her story. The events were recorded in court transcripts, newspapers, and legal records, not just oral folklore. On August 29, 2016, the Trom family suddenly fled their home in Sylvan, Victoria, leaving their phones, credit cards and passports behind. They didn't tell anyone they were leaving. There was no sign of mental illness, drug use or recent trauma. They had a successful berry farm and lived a quiet, rural life. Neighbours described them as normal, grounded and private, but something made them run. Shortly into the trip, the family began acting erratically. They insisted their lives were in danger, though they never said why or from whom. They believed they were being followed. They thought someone was out to steal their money or identities. They avoided all technology, fearing they were being tracked. They tore the GPS from the car and discarded anything that could trace them. This was no ordinary road trip. This was a family on the run from something invisible. Mitchell, the middle child, left the group in Bathurst after a heated argument. He took a train back home, confused and frustrated, and reported the incident to the police. Ella, the youngest, later stole a car and drove to Melbourne. She then turned herself in, telling police her family had lost touch with reality. The 3 remaining family members, Mark, Jacoba and Rihanna, continued north, deeper into New South Wales. The family was falling apart and disappearing one by one. Over the next 48 hours, the rest of the family was found, but scattered across the region, each in a different town, with no idea what had just happened. Rihanna was found catatonic in the back of a stranger's ute, pickup truck. She had climbed in and refused to speak. Jacoba, the mother, was discovered wandering alone in a rural street in Yass, disoriented and mentally unwell. Mark, the father, was last to be found, calmly walking in Wangaratta, 600 kilometres or 372 miles from where they started. He refused to explain his actions. Doctors found no drugs or toxins in their systems. There was no cult, no criminal activity, and no evidence of mental illness prior to the event. The official explanation: a shared psychotic episode, or folie à plusieurs, madness shared by many. But that diagnosis usually applies to pairs, not 5 people. To this day, no one has fully explained what triggered it. The family simply went home and never spoke publicly again. Collective psychotic episode. Maybe the father did experience a break from reality, and his panic influenced the rest. But even so, what would cause all the others, intelligent adults, to fall in line so quickly? The family lived a relatively isolated life on a berry farm. Could a fear, real or imagined, have grown slowly over months, until it suddenly burst? There's a fringe theory that some toxin or mold exposure may have affected their cognition, causing anxiety and delusion, but no evidence of this was ever found. They knew something we didn't. This is the conspiracy angle. What if their paranoia wasn't unjustified? What if something or someone was threatening them and they couldn't speak about it? They didn't disappear into a forest. They didn't encounter a creature. They simply lost their grip on reality, and it all happened in plain sight. There's something terrifying about the idea that you could wake up one day and not trust your own mind.